dot dot dot, or what it's more formally known as, the ellipses. These three characters have haunted me for the better part of my professional career. Whenever I received these messages from an older colleague, I met with fear, uncertainty, and anxiousness. I like to call these messages boomer texts. Older people, they text differently. At times, it can come across as overly formal, or maybe even passive-aggressive to some. So, I wanted to look into this phenomenon more. Why do boomers text the way they do? Even more so than just my hurt feelings, these messages can at times come across as confusing. There's obviously a disconnect here. Maybe older people don't mean to come across the way they do when they text, or maybe we're just being overly sensitive. So I wanted to get to the bottom of it. Now, depending on the age group you're in, this may sound slightly ridiculous to you. And sure, I am being dramatic, but these feelings aren't too far from the truth. And I'm not the only one who feels this way. I talked to some of my friends from work to see how they feel about these kinds of texts.
It's very cold as opposed to, what we do, especially in our remote world where we use emoticons like they're going out of style. It's just inviting ways to read that text wrong. It's like getting a "we need to talk" text all the time.
So I don't think every text has to have emojis, but definitely no periods after simple words like no period. That makes me feel like I'm getting fired, It's really, I feel like I'm in trouble. Or if you just say my name, Marina, period, that's just it. I'm gonna be nervous for the rest of the day or until I get the next message that explains what happened, right?
It is sometimes confusing because I don't think they realize how loaded some of their messages come across. Sometimes you'll get one-word answers with a period at the end, a yes, period, and immediately you're like, oh, what do they mean by that? Is there something wrong? Are they angry about the question I asked?
I noticed that, there's certain emojis that only boomers use, things like that.
That's Ai Taniguchi. She's an assistant professor of English language linguistics and will be helping us out today. More with her later on, but for now, I want to tell you about some potential theories I found about why older people use the ellipses so often when texting. Some think the overuse of the ellipses may have to do with this thing. Although these are mostly relegated to cute souvenirs nowadays, these postcards used to be a valuable way of communication. And as you can see, they're pretty small, so space was limited. In order to transition to a new thought, instead of putting a line break, which people might instinctively do now, people writing on postcards would use an ellipses. This punctuation was used to transition between thoughts. Nowadays, we'd use a line break, period, or comma to do that. But back when postcards were a popular means of communication, an ellipses just happened to be the go-to method for that. And before I even started researching for this video, I didn't even know the ellipses could be used in this context. And that's because these dots are kind of confusing. Something like a period has a single function, which is to end a sentence, but an ellipses has multiple uses and functions.
The ... can be taken to be really a lot of things, because like I say, we often use punctuation to sort of stylize the text, to add intonation and things like that. And so whether you have a sentence with one period or no period, right? or ... or ... with more dots, right? There's a famous episode from The Office where they talk about the difference between the 3 dots and the 5 dots.
You're such a great friend.
With the dots.
You're such a great friend. ...
Oh.
5 dots, Daryl? Are you kidding me?
And the interpretations and uses of ellipses don't end there. In journalism, it can be used to shorten quotes, and in novels, the ellipses can be used to convey a pause in dialogue or some sort of action in the story. So in other words, they can communicate that there's something left unsaid. So when you're receiving that text from your boss that ends in an ellipses, it might subconsciously make you feel worried. Great work? What does he mean by great work? But as you probably know, it's not just the ellipses that older people use when texting. They also use periods, exclamation points, and emojis differently or sometimes not at all.
Yeah, I think there's definitely there's various dialects basically of texting language and internet language more generally speaking. And so I don't think there is a unique, internet language. There's not a unique online language that, that is spoken by everyone, right? And so in the same way that in spoken language, there are different dialects. So we know for sure, right? In spoken English, depending on which age group you're in, right? There's different ways that you speak and things like that. This is sort of a natural outcome of the birth of computer mediated speech.
In business correspondence, people used to never use an exclamation point in emails or letters, but now for younger people, it's almost required in every email thread you'll see at least one exclamation point. Exclamation points when used in an email might not necessarily mean you're excited about something. Instead, they can be used to symbolize a sense of warmth or informality when talking business. And periods used to be a neutral way to end a sentence, but can now be interpreted as cold and overly formal in certain scenarios, like when you're texting someone. And if you find some of these points to be ridiculous or maybe an overanalyzation, then I bet you didn't grow up with the internet. You might look at texting as a strictly functional way of communicating. But for those of us who grew up with things like MSN, Snapchat, or any other form of instant messaging, then you might know that texting can be a way to show off your personality. And by that I mean, with us texting so often, people have kind of had to figure out a way to develop a sort of digital body language. Instead of being able to talk to someone and use facial expressions and body language, younger generations have become experts at doing it through text. This can be done with emojis, slang, or maybe something as simple as a line break. And even if you're not doing this on purpose, you probably know how each of your friends text you, even without seeing their contact name.
Some people just use, I have a friend who uses just the blue heart emoji all the time because that's her favorite color. It's the same way where, in real life, you wear certain clothes to sort of communicate certain sort of social meaning and things like that. It's who you are. And so I think it's a really cool and valid way to sort of express who you are, like using emojis or certain punctuation and things like that.
With us having a screen in front of us, it might feel like we should all be texting the same, but that's not the case. Just like different generations might talk differently in person, there's no reason they won't do the same with texting as well. And that goes for younger generations as well. You might text completely differently than how you talk in person, but we need to move past that in order to communicate.
So the way that we text, of course, can also be a communicator of who we are, our identity as well. So to reject the way that someone speaks, regardless of it being text or in spoken language, to reject that means that you're rejecting their identity as well. And I don't think that's okay. And so I think we should embrace it for sure.
So whether you're older and upset about people using too many emojis, or younger and worried about people using too many periods or ellipses, maybe we just need to accept it from both sides. Similar to how you wouldn't want someone to change their accent when they speak, I don't know if we need to do that with texting either. So, to all the boomers out there, keep on texting how you